Hello friends and enemies, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about another episode of Moral Orel. This time it's going to be on Alone, Season 3, Episode 4. This episode goes over some deep topics as you would expect from Moral Orel, so if you are sensitive about the topics of sexual trauma, rape, abortion, forced non-consensual medical procedures, just know that you have been warned. Alright, so let's begin. This episode starts out with the radio announcer letting us know that this episode takes place the day that Orel leaves to go on the hunting trip with his father. The show continues on to the next segment, this one being on Reverend Putty's sermon. He lets us know that he is going to be talking about women in this sermon as a sort of dedication to all the women in Moralton. Due to this show taking place in the past, he mentions how all of the women stay home and take care of the house while their husbands work. Essentially, he also kind of belittles them by saying that their duties are trivial and mentioning that how that is okay since they already did their most important job, that being giving birth to their husband's children. While he says this, we see a sad nurse Bendy returning home from work, but once she enters the house, her face instantly lights up. This is most likely due to this being a place where she can genuinely feel safe and happy for a while before having to head out back into the world. A few things to note here are, one being that she turns off the radio when she gets inside. I assume it's so her family can be entertained while she is away. Secondly, her room is stylized like that of a little girl, and also her family are stuffed teddy bears. Now, I recently did a video that went in depth on Nurse Bendy, and if that topic interests you, I will be linking that video down below. Moving on, she greets her family, that being her husband, Hubby, the stuffed bear, and her son, Sonny, the stuffed bear. These stuffed bears are supposed to represent her actual family that she longs for, but she does not have a husband at this point, and she isn't allowed to live with her son at this point either. Again, if you want to know more about that, the link to the other video is down below. She apologizes to her family since she was late due to the principal at the school having her stay and do a lot of adult things today, emphasis on adult, even though there wasn't any school today. She surprises her family by showing off her adulty outfit, and by that she means a typical housewife outfit. She then goes on to say how they should set a good example for their son. She happily goes to the kitchen to get some food for her family, as according to Nurse Bendy, it is swallow time. She ends up grabbing some sandwiches and milk for her family, and she remembers that they must pray before they can begin to eat their meal. As she prays for some very interesting things. Some of the more notable ones are how they need people who don't care about doing awful, dirty things to you. This is in reference to sex. How they need family because they care that she is a real person with thoughts like sadness, happiness, aloneness. She goes on to say how she needs people to know that she feels emotions. And while that prayer ends, she is crying but does not acknowledge the emotional pain that she is feeling. Anyways, they move on to eating as the camera transitions into the apartment next door. That apartment being the one of Agnes Sculpton, Orel's 6th grade teacher. She enters her apartment and flips the light switch nearly 20 times before she looks over at the kitchen table to see a bloody extended hanger, followed by a feeling of pain in her abdominal region. She locks her door and walks away, but then looks back at it with a look of contemplation, and then unlocks and relocks the door multiple times before she begins to feel more pain. She goes to get a glass of water so she can take some aspirin. After she does that, she hesitantly grabs the bloody hanger, wipes the blood off it, and sets it back in its proper shape before using it to hang up her clothes. She goes and turns on her radio only to hear Reverend Putty has gone to the part of his sermon about abortion, to which she quickly turns off the radio. And she shows a look of guilt, pain, and regret for a while before she turns it back on. At this point, Reverend Putty is talking about kids and how they are miracles. While he is talking about kids and how they are little versions of ourselves, Agnes is looking at the family tree, showing us that she is an only child and was originally blonde. As she looks at the picture of herself, we see it change from her blonde and smiling to her with black hair and frowning. All the while, this buzzing and ringing noise that has been heard each time that she has felt pain is heard. Then the Reverend's sermon is interrupted for a news report. The news report is on a serial rapist called Cecil Creepler that was found dead in his cell after 1 month of being incarcerated. We hear sounds of horror as his picture flashes across the screen. From the information about Agnes that we have gathered so far, we can piece together a story that 1, she recently gave herself an abortion with the coat hanger, and that she was most likely raped, given how in her traumatic flashes we see Cecil's face. After this, the camera then moves on to the next apartment, that being Miss Censordoll's apartment, the town's librarian and an extreme religious fundamentalist that serves as the town's moral lead, sometimes from behind the scenes even. We see her shut the curtains and go turn off the radio. She calls Reverend Putty a fool because he said that, to God, babies are job security. We get a close-up of her face as she states that little babies are the devil's scabies. She then goes on to open the fridge, and we see it's full of eggs, as what would be expected of the character that seems to be obsessed with eggs. She goes on to take one egg out of the carton to caress it. She has a look of disdain while the phone rings and says, "I'm not home yet, mother. I told you 9 p.m. no sooner." She then goes to the bed to lay down for a while holding the egg over her abdomen, only to be awoken by the phone ringing again. She then goes to call someone, mentioning a plan B and how the mayor, that being Orel's dad, Clay, is in her back pocket. She then requests from the person on the phone that they get her some fertilized eggs that are teeming with life. The person on the other end seems to be disgusted by this request, but she says that she will reward him greatly by allowing him to see her dry virtue if he does so. She mentions that her mother is the reason why she is like that. Her mother calls once again, but this time she actually picks up the phone and lies to her, saying that she just got in. And they go on to talk about Reverend Putty's sermon, and their mother mentions her lack of eggs as a hindrance. And Miss Censordoll gets mad about this since it was her mother's fault that she has no eggs in her body. She goes on to say that what was the point of removing her reproductive organs if she can't be an expert on it, and goes on to say that she was an infant when her mother had them removed. This just goes to show why Miss Censordoll has a great disdain for her mother. She took her child's ability to have children of her own at such a young age. This is why she has an obsession with eggs that we see throughout the series. It's because she does not have any eggs of her own. She goes on to end the phone call, saying that I am not holier than thou, but I am holier than you. We then move back to Nurse Bendy, picking up the plates for her family, when a sandwich falls off onto the floor and mustard gets on the carpet. While she cleans it up, she's partially backing up into the husband teddy bear, and this ends up knocking him down on top of her. She cries out, "Hubby, you can't, not you," crying out even more as the milk from the table falls on her face. She backs away to the wall, saying not like everyone else. She cries, saying how he is different and how he was supposed to be special. This just goes to show that the sexual trauma that she has experienced over the years has affected her to a point where any person who has sex with her, she views it as them just wanting to use her. That is why she is traumatized by this action. It's because in her mind, the bear was a person who genuinely cared about her and her thoughts and emotions, and them having sex with her right now meant that they only were interested in her body. We move on back to Agnes Sculptman, who is looking at the old newspaper clippings in her bathroom. The radio announcer tells us about how Agnes is a hero for taking down the rapist by investigating him and sacrificing her virginity along with her natural blonde hair. We hear the announcer talk about how Agnes said in an interview that she just left her doors unlocked. While Agnes is looking at the clippings on the wall, as they pass by, we get information about the rapist's profile and that he likes dark-haired individuals and he does not like blondes. We see that in the clippings and the headlines about a 36-year-old housewife saying that he forced her to her first orgasm. In the trauma, she rips the clippings off the mirror only to see a reflection of herself while blonde looking unhappy, while that is replaced with a version of herself with dark hair smiling. She then continues to feel more pain in her abdomen, then looks up and smiles as she sees Cecil in the mirror. The camera then turns to the wall outside the bathroom and we see his shadow enter the room, while the other shadow of Agnes is slowly backing away in fear until it reluctantly moves closer and ends up locking hands with his in an almost loving way, and then the two begin to intertwine and wrap around one another. We then cut back to Agnes smiling on the ground, seemingly reminiscing on the physical pleasure only to feel great pain again in her abdomen, while Cecil in the mirror shakes his head while looking at her. The sounds of a baby can be heard as a look of pain and shame comes across her face. So at this point we can piece together the whole story that has played out. Not only was Agnes raped by Cecil and got pregnant from that, and then she ended up killing the baby with a coat hanger, but we now know how she closely followed the case and even changed her appearance to match that of what Cecil liked. She then left her doors unlocked as an invitation to let him in. You might wonder why she did what she did, and it's part of the theme of this episode. She was alone for so long and longed for another person's touch. When she was laying on the ground after seeing the imagery of the shadows, she had a look of sexual gratification on her face. We see in the clippings that Cecil led a housewife to her first orgasm. And being all alone, Agnes wanted to experience that type of sexual gratification. And as we can see from the shadows, she was originally afraid and hesitant at first when Cecil arrived. But we also see that her shadow ends up holding hands with him for a moment, showing us that she wasn't forced like the other victims. No, this shows that at least part of her was willing to let this man take advantage of her and use her body. And look, I'm not an expert on psychology or anything, but we see similar things to this in real life. There are people out there who are sexually attracted to criminals, where onlookers that are not even part of the crimes themselves, for some reason, either wish it was them or wish that they can be with the criminals. If you guys ever watched the Ted Bundy documentaries, they talk about how a lot of young girls would show up to his court hearings, and in all honesty, they acted like fans of the man. One of them even ends up marrying him. Even Charles Manson, after he got convicted and was found guilty, there was still some young woman who ended up marrying him. The name of this condition is called hybristophilia. Hopefully I pronounced that right. A condition where sexual arousal is linked to a partner who acts out against society via outrage and crime. Now once again, I'm not an expert on psychology, nor am I a licensed professional, but from what the clues in the show lead us to, I believe that Agnes Sculptum was a person with this condition for Cecil Creepler. As she was alone reading up on this case of all the crimes that this man did, she ended up growing a certain level of attraction for him, leading her to leave her door unlocked and change her hair in hopes that he would come and assault her. I'd love for you guys to give your thoughts about this in the comments. Maybe you see this differently or have something to add about this, but this is just the conclusions that I came to. But for now, let's move on back to Miss Censordoll. We see her painting a figurine for a model of the town that she has, while Reverend Putty talks about how we need others in our life as a reminder that we are not the center of the universe. And while she eats an egg, Putty says because there is one person who has reserved that part of the cosmos. While she eats that egg, a piece of the yolk ends up falling out, and Miss Censordoll holds it and states that yes, me. Basically stating that she is the center of the universe, and then places the yolk on top of the steeple of the church, stating that she is the matriarch of Moralton. And that's where this episode ends. And wow, this was a heavy one to get through. Like the title of this episode would suggest, the main theme is loneliness and how it affects people. In Nurse Bendy, we can see that due to her loneliness, she has a pretend family of stuffed bears. She has to have a stuffed bear for her husband because no man in her life will acknowledge her as a human being that has emotions and thoughts. While with Agnes Sculptum, we see that she was lonely and that she never had any other partner in her life, so she sought out the physical pleasure of a serial rapist only to end up aborting the child that was a result of that act. And this caused her to feel a great deal of pain and guilt while she looked at her family tree, seeing that she was the last in her family lineage. She hears how Reverend Putty talks about how amazing children are and how they are like small versions of yourself, and she feels guilty about what she did and continues to feel this great amount of loneliness. And lastly, there is Miss Censordoll, the lady who was obsessed over having a bunch of eggs because she had her eggs taken away from her. She lives a lone life, but probably not by choice. Her ability to have children was taken away from her before she was even conscious. She has resentment for this having been done to her. This leads to her symbolically and literally seeking to have more precious eggs. Another aspect of how loneliness has affected her is how she plots to have control over the town, because in her mind, she rationalizes that since she got her reproductive organs removed, that she must be the most virtuous and therefore be the one who should be in charge. And that's all for today, guys. Like I said before, this was a hard one to get through. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'd really appreciate it if you left a like on the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're new here to the channel. And I'd like to thank all of you for watching these videos and supporting me. I'm amazed to say that we have reached the 200 subscriber point. And hopefully this channel will continue to grow more as time goes on. I'll be linking the Discord link down below if anyone is interested in joining there. And once again, I'd like to thank you all for watching and supporting the content. And until next time, I'll see you.